Major funding for these programs is provided by grants from First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Murray Hill Properties, Bank of America, SJP Properties, Allied Partners, Greenberg Traurig LP. Additional funding is provided by grants from Arbor Realty Trust, Antares Investment Partners, Athena Group, BRT Realty Trust, Burden LLP, CB Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, Gemini Real Estate Advisors LLC, Herrick Feinstein, Helmsley Spear, Jackson Development Group, John Katzimatidis, Herbert J. Sims Company, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Kilroy Metal Products, Madison Realty Capital, Marcus and Millichap, Meridian Capital Group, M&T Bank, Must Development LLC, Newmark Knight Frank, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal, Sidney Fettner Associates, Sheldrake Organization, Signature Bank, Studley, the Moynihan Organization, Triangle Services, the Witkoff Organization, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller, host of the Stoller Report, Real Estate Trends in the Tri-State Region. New Yorkers, people around the world love to eat. And where do they get the best places to eat is New York City. And I got these guys who operate in New York City, but also operate around the world over there. And then I have the leasing broker who's the leasing broker to the restaurant world, and who are going to tell me about the restaurant business in New York. Today, my guests include Jeffrey Roseman, Executive Vice President and Principal of Newmark Knight Frank Retail, Lawrence Kretschmer, President or Principal with Bobby Flay of Bold Foods, Alistair Paglia, General Manager of the Original Palm 837. And last but not least, the guy who has to go to see Sex in the City in a minute for the opening.
We call it No Sex in the City.
No Sex in the City. The infamous president of Myriad Restaurants, Drew near Porrent. So, Nobu, Bar America, the Palm. What's happening? What's happening with the food business? You've been with the Palm for 32 years. I mean, we were talking prior to the show that was the restaurant, okay? You know, when he was a kid, you know, he would like to go there. What's happened to the Palm? What's happened to the restaurant business in the Tri-State region?
I think over the years, you know, various situations occurred, expense accounts, non-smoking laws, people being laid off from their jobs, stock market going up and down, real estate. Business is not what it used to be. It's still holding up pretty good for us because we have a good brand name. We're known throughout the world, especially this time, you know, a lot of tourists in town that we don't call them tourists anymore, we call them visitors.
Visitors, and we love them.
They've known our restaurant for many, many years, and they are the big spenders today. And they are the ones that are dropping money into the restaurant. And thank God we have them.
Because it's a bargain for them. I own a restaurant in London where every time I look at the menu, 24 pounds means 48 American dollars. For the same thing we're spending $24 for in America. So for Europeans to come to New York, everything's a discount to them.
You know, but I have a question. What happens if Europeans don't come to New York that fast? What effect is that going to have? I mean, you got the...
That's why we're worried about oil prices, because the planes, they have to get here. And you're right, that's a good point. Airfares now are starting to skyrocket, and it's going to impede them from coming.
Right, well, it's easier for them, somebody in London to go to Paris, or someone in London, you know, to maybe even go to the Middle East. I mean, I know there'll be a Nobu or something like that over there, but you know, if the prices skyrocket, if there are other situations, and I will tell you, and I don't know if you've seen it, and I think you may have seen this, the Irish were very active investors in New York, in the New York City real estate scene. They were active lenders in the market. And last year, the Irish stock market went down substantially. And now those Irish investors are not as active in New York. I don't know if they're still running to your
We had a
place.
deal with one guy who just totally backed out.
Yeah, but I think that there are other micro or macro trends that compensate for the variations that happen as a result of currency and the dollar. Even sort of a bigger, longer term trend than all of that is that people care now more than ever before about what they eat and where they eat. So where maybe people were coming, forget people coming from overseas, let's say people traveling to New York on business, who before might have taken a meal in the hotel or in a coffee shop or just, gotten food that way. They now look at coming to a place like New York as an opportunity to do something special for themselves.
Totally right. I mean,
which is having a meal that they can't get at home. And so in New York, the industry as a whole has benefited from that tremendously. In their hometown, there may be no palm, even though there is, 3,000 palms? No, I'm just kidding.
28.
There's 28 palms, but still,
48.
the guy may be coming from a market where there's no palm. There's no Nobu. There's no Mesa Grill. There's no. So I think while some of those bigger trends some parts of our business may go down, other parts that I think have a bigger macro impact on the industry that have to do with the notion of eating out have sort of overwhelmed any of those little variations. So that long term, it's become better.
Yeah, there's even another issue. I mean, what you guys do now is you guys are rock stars. I mean, the Food Network thing has taken the restaurant business into another stratosphere. People see on TV and they read about it, and they're dying to come to these restaurants, and that's what I
Diners, divers. I mean, that's what's on the Food Network these days. What happened to Emerald? You got diners, divers, with the hair over there. I mean, they're running over there. Want to find a new place in Jersey City?
Yeah, food is no longer just nourishment. It's become part of our culture.
it's the entertainment.
It's become a form of entertainment.
Yeah, totally.
And people, now the guy comes to New York. He goes. He comes here on business and he goes home, and the kid says, Daddy, what did you do? And he goes, I ate at such and such a restaurant. And the kid knows what he's talking about. Right. He says, what'd you eat? And he says, I ate a...
This, you really bring it up. We have friends in Cleveland. I know there's nothing in Cleveland. And these people come here all the time, and my wife gets a phone call from these people the other day. She says, yeah, we went to Aga. I said, Aga? So my wife says, Aga? I said, oh, he's going to be on my show. I mean, it's a new place. People from around, I said, how do you find about this? This small little place next in the hotel over there, people know about it. People want to be there. Right. Where do people want to rent? When these guys are looking for spaces, how do they make a decision? How do you tell them where to go?
Well, these guys I don't have to tell. They're, especially
the ones who aren't as...
Well, look, obviously, depending on what the restaurant is looking for, there are various day parts, and it really has come down to rents. The economics in the city have become a bit prohibitive for restaurants to succeed, and now it's about making creative deals, whether it's certainly off the avenue, perhaps by level. But the day of a restaurateur taking a site, mid avenue, like Doc's did 15, 20 years ago, those rents are just out of control.
The market seems to be set by the guy who's willing to pay the most. I always thought it was great to watch Wayne Gretzky because he made the most money as an NHL hockey player. His fellow players didn't hit him as hard as they hit everybody else. Why? Because he set the bar high and everybody's salary came right under his. The minute Jeff makes a deal with somebody paying a high rent, we're all expected to pay that high rent. I made a living out of going to off the beaten path neighborhood, Tribeca, below Canal Street, and paying below market rents, and for that matter, never paying a percentage rent. Now it's the culture of what they do to always ask for a minimum and a percentage rent. So,
well, that's also partly because the stakes have been raised so high. Not only is the rent bar raised, but you have to create this thing that's just so sort of over the top to make an impact, because
we shot ourselves in the foot.
Exactly.
Lawrence.
I mean, we
Lawrence, I'll give you an example. Even your restaurants are an example. We're penalizing ourselves when we pay percentage rent. We're actually, if you work out what percentage rent actually means for the landlord, he becomes.
He's a partner.
Unless it's unless the rent starts at a lower base rent.
Well,
where the market gets stuck is what comes along with my percentage rent.
Right.
What are you going to do for me? If you're going to be my partner, then be my partner.
Also,
I mean, unless you like the Palm, where they own their own property.
Well, we did the deal with the Palm on the west side about 12 years ago, and the Resnicks who own the building partnered up, put money up, and took a piece of the upside. And I believe both sides are very happy. Yes, the restaurant does tremendous. The Resnicks started at a much lower base rent than they could have gotten.
But basically,
they wanted the Palm
but they wanted the Palm, and they took an equity piece in the deal basically over there. And what Drew says, what Lawrence is saying is, hey, I don't need a partner. I have enough partners in my own business. Okay,
well, Michael, I went to Cornell Hotel School. What did they teach us? How to run a successful business: location, location, location.
But
all
of a sudden, you went to Tribeca. That wasn't a location.
Guess why I went to Tribeca? It was the
cheap
only
rent.
thing. No, it was the only thing I could afford, and it happened to be cheap. And I signed a lease in 1985. And I think ultimately, in a lot of ways, we changed the neighborhood.
Pioneer, way before.
But I'm going to ask.
Everyone should pay you a toll.
Okay, but I'm going to ask the question.
To go down to Tribeca.
You know, Mesa Grill. You've been there for 20 years. Close
18.
18 years. When's your lease up?
Never.
No, but do you own the building?
No.
No, but what I'm saying is, few people, and I still remember when I negotiated leases a couple of years, what's going to happen in 20 years? Nothing's going to happen, I think. And a good example was Park Avenue Cafe. When this year the landlord said, hey, you want to stay there or you want to pay a rent? I mean, a rent, you can't afford to pay $700,000 a year in rent. I don't care how much food you're selling and how much wine. So, there's a question. I mean, do you own any of your locations?
Yes. The second restaurant that I opened with Robert De Niro in 1990 was the Tribeca Grill, which was a typical leaseback deal where he bought a depressed property with partners and sold off each floor, which one was the restaurant, of which I have a nice piece of equity. Best deal I've ever made. Obviously, the real estate's appreciated, and I thought that would be the modus operandi of every deal. And guess what? In San Francisco, when we opened Rubicon in 1994, owned that building, and actually wound up selling that prior to the bubble bursting in 2000. But those are really the only deals. And in our case, by the way, because our rent was so low at the Nobu, I negotiated the first Nobu lease. Our rent was 0.85%. That was our occupancy, because I was paying $5,000 a month rent. And the restaurant was doing in excess of $9 million.
But remember what was there before and what was going on.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Right.
Well, but that's my argument as to why I would never really want to sign
Those are definitely
So,
the exceptions.
we drive the
Location
business.
is as important or more
But keep in mind, they taught me in hotel school, the only way to be successful is find a good location.
Okay, you talk about
The
locations.
opposite.
You created that whole neighborhood.
What about, look, have you been to Williamsburg recently? I mean,
all over Brooklyn it's happening.
I mean, in Williamsburg, in former warehouses, in other places, there's one place like 7,000 square feet. It's packed at night. I mean, you and I are too old to go there at night.
Different
but
business.
Lawrence could go there. But
different price point, different business.
Right.
They don't have all the day parts. It's not that same bar that
But
we
if
talked
you're
about.
in a restaurant
it's a
business,
different bar.
if he's leasing space, or if you're running,
but the rents have gone
He
up
won't
there.
call me about Williamsburg because he knows I'm not going.
But wait a second. But your lunch crowd is smaller. I mean, lunch business is smaller than night business, right?
We have two locations on the same avenue. So we have two restaurants open at the same time, Palm 1 and Palm 2. So, you have your loyal customers on each side.
But Al, a couple of blocks away, it was Ruth Chris who first opened up another steakhouse.
That
4
location
blocks
was too
away.
large.
And then, you leased it? Oh, sure.
He's trying real hard right now.
Okay. then another steak place opened, which was a nightmare. I remember going there for some real
Blair
estate.
Perone.
Blair Perone was like.
Perone.
Hope you don't have any involvement with that one. No way.
I'm just trying to help him lease the space.
And now it's a bowling alley.
But-
what do you
but,
want? I mean,
look,
they could put the gym up a little higher.
Michael brings up a good point, because space, I've always related to space like a person. And sometimes when you walk into space, you know immediately it's going to work, whether it's the ceiling, if it's square.
And when it's not going to work.
Sometimes you talk yourself into doing it even though you know it's not going to work. and that's the problem. But what's interesting is that this generation, the people that I see at least going out almost several times a week, are a much younger generation, and they're willing to put up with small, cramped, noisy. They actually transcend to that form of dining versus what we used to think, which is space between tables, comfortable chairs, you know.
Wait, I'll give you an example. We were talking prior to the show, we were talking about Wolfgangs. Basically, a waiter, who used to work for, Peter Luger's, opens up 2 locations. One that's not doing too well downtown to you, and the one on 33rd Street. You can't walk in. I taped a show a couple of months ago with everybody who was under 30. I was there also, and they all wanted.
You're not tipping enough, Michael.
I know, and I was. No, we went in there, the 5 young guys and me, and all I know is you couldn't hear each other. I mean, the noise level, but that place. Prior to them, it was a bomb.
Yeah.
No one could
Nobody
make
wanted
that
to
place.
make it work. You're right.
But if you look at the fundamentals of the location, it's not on the periphery of the island of Manhattan. It's in the middle of, there's people there. And if there are people there and you let them, I don't think that's.
I don't think he has any competition as
Yeah,
far as steakhouse.
I don't think that's a
concerned.
great example of something that's in an obscure location. What Drew has done in Tribeca makes that look like the heart of Manhattan.
But Tribeca today is the hottest neighborhood.
but
the rents
when
are
was
up
it?
No, I wouldn't go.
No.
As much as I'd like to
you can
endorse that,
count the
the
success
hottest
stories
neighborhood
on
is the
one
Meat
hand.
District, which was empty when I was pioneering Tribeca. The hottest district is the Lower East Side, which all of us, our parents and our grandparents grew up in, and we
So
ventured down there
my
under
question
duress.
is here. I got operators
hot
over here,
neighborhoods.
and you've been a visionary. You've been a visionary, Bobby. Okay, what about the Lower East Side today? The Lower East Side rents for a residential apartment are $82 a square foot. It's the highest price for rental over there.
That's only because the apartments are so small.
That's exactly right. They are, but it's $82 a square foot. And across the street from Katz's is this Ludlow. The building's called the Ludlow. You have nothing there.
$3,400 for one bedroom.
$3,600 for one bedroom. But these are the people who are going to your restaurant. Some of them are still going to the Palm. These are the people. Where are they going?
Well, this is the shifting state of affairs in New York City. Having grown up here, you would have had to put a gun to my head to make me think that I could do business in the Lower East Side.
You still wouldn't do business there because there's still not enough people that are living or working there to make a restaurant on the scale that you would open be worthwhile.
Right. Well, although again, destination. People would find.
What is the scale? We were talking prior to the show about developers are developers. They got to develop. Restaurant guys are like junkies. The same thing. You got to open up a new restaurant. It's each month another new restaurant. Okay.
This is actually, and we were talking about this because the Palm did something that nobody did at a time when nobody was doing it, which is the restaurant business is not a great model to extrapolate. It's a really hands-on business and a labor-intensive business, but a steakhouse without a real chef is easier to reproduce. But for instance, Bobby Flay has made himself the brand and can't possibly be in every restaurant at the same time. Yet he and Lawrence have been able to train a cutting-edge group of people that produce their food. The food critics used to keep our feet to the fire. You're spreading yourself too thin, and criticize us for branching out. Andre Solder was always at Lutèce, and that's the way it should be. But guess what? A second Palm, a second Bobby Flay restaurant, an extrapolation of what I do is better, in most cases, than an original something that just doesn't have the breeding, the talent, the bona fides of what we accomplish.
Which is why those restaurants don't play in the bigger playing field. Why they'll still open in places like the Lower East Side, where they can still get in for a lower. The barriers to entry.
But the biggest reason,
right.
Lawrence, the biggest reason is we are in the era, indisputably, of the brand. People recognize the brand. I fought it for years.
But
I didn't want to make the same movie over and over again.
But you know what? You are a brand. You have myriad. Okay, brand. You have a brand. You have a brand. Okay,
it's all about the brand.
Okay, but what's happening with the brand? How do people? Other people go out there to find the space. Who's looking today?
Well, that's another.
They use on there.
That's another. These guys are not only competing with other restaurants; they're competing with national chains, you know,
And
clothing
we compete
stores.
against ourselves because when you create something like Bobby Flay's restaurant or Drew Napoleon has Nobu and Tribeca Grill. Now Nobu, we learned a tremendous lesson. We went Midtown. My partners wanted to do it. I was against it because I didn't think it was cool and hip to be Midtown. Guess what? We do $20 million in gross sales.
And that's a great example. The only way
incredible.
you guys can
$20
do
million.
deals these days is to have a landlord who truly wants you in their building.
Richard Lafrac, who's our landlord at 40 West 57, stepped up to the plate, wanted us, knew the value that we would bring to the building, and cut us a great deal.
And I got news for you. It brings value to the building.
No question.
Right.
But
10% on
that's
the
what's
rolls.
also caused the slowdown. You were saying before the show that none of you guys have done a deal that recently in Manhattan. So we're suffering from some sort of a stasis right now because there's an inability to meet in the middle because while the real estate market has seen some depression, these guys are coming in with these guys being the landlords are coming in with their old basis. They don't want to take a rent that's more better pegged to where the cost of development and the cost of building is and what the potential return can be. And so there's a little tug of war going on right now.
Unfortunately, there's something, and we are, in the summer type. Isn't there a little denial that we are in a recession? I mean, isn't this recession having some effect on the food? We talked about the European travelers, but the recession, you don't see it having any reduction, or everybody wants to go to the top #1 restaurants in the city?
I would be lying if on a daily basis I could tell you that I feel a pinch here and there. I do see it at lunchtime in Tribeca because especially the financial world have to be tethered to their desk. They're not going out at lunch. So Nobu, Tribeca Grill at lunchtime, we're close to the financial area. But at nighttime, our sales are very strong, remarkably strong. Maybe offset by the visitor interest.
What about you?
Offset by
strong. I think that if you have a business that has multiple customer bases, I think you're running even.
And what about your wine and liquor business because of the imported wine and everything?
Everything goes up.
It all goes up. People pay a little more. The individual doesn't. The individual sometimes goes into a state of denial. So the guy's worried about his job. He's not going to not go out to dinner because how does that make him feel?
But maybe are they drinking more? I mean,
they may be. I think.
I mean,
but you know what? What's interesting? Maybe you can shed some light on this. The speakeasy has come back, but it's come back in a very strange way. It's like they're charging $20 for drinks now. We haven't even. What do you charge for a cocktail at the pub? $11. 14.
11 to 14.
But they're charging $20 in a place.
I think
and
ours
they're
is
doing
still a
you a
good
favor,
value.
letting them. These kids, I don't know where they're getting the money, but they're getting the money someplace.
I think
They're living 3 and 4 people in
No.
the apartment.
The greatest thing
I
is
don't get it.
I have a dynamic web designer, graphic artist who takes care of my web, and he's 25 and he lives with these 4 other kids. They all went to Ramaz, and I said, Marshall, where do you go? He says, we go down to the Gansevoort and we get a bottle. I said, you get a bottle? I said, a bottle?
$1,200.
350. This way we get a setup and we get our table. I said, Marshall, I said, maybe, I know your father. I mean, there's something wrong. I mean, but this is, and maybe you're right. I mean, but I think, unfortunately, and you've seen it, come on, people are slowing down. I mean, forget the restaurant business. The regular retail business, isn't it down a little bit?
I got to tell you, from a New York standpoint, the demand for space in New York City is as high as it's ever been because besides for restaurants and chains, you've got all corporate companies that still want to open showrooms. We did a deal with Walgreens in Times Square. They took one Times Square, and a huge part of that is just as a branding. Obviously.
Say it. How much was the rent, Jeff?
Nice.
They
took the entire building.
They took the entire building.
That doesn't help guys like us because the comps just become obscene.
Well,
Wait a second, you can go into the garment center, the former garment center.
We don't want to put up billboards. We want to open restaurants where people can come and eat.
No, wait a second, but let's talk about that.
Yeah,
you have new office buildings. Okay, 8th Avenue, which until the Palm went over there.
Worldwide Plaza.
Okay, there was nothing. And now you have the New York Times building.
Sure.
That some, I don't know who's
Somebody's
up
going
there.
in
So
there.
somebody's going in there. Then you're going to have SJP's property over there, and you're going to have a lot of properties on 8th Avenue. And nothing has really, with the exception of the Palm, has really made it on 8th Avenue. I mean, the Restaurant Row, 46th Street, 47th Street, they die unless there's theater. Do you see that happening? I mean, is that a place where a guy, I mean, you're not too far away with...
Not too far away. But those couple blocks make a big difference.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to put something in the vicinity of Madison Square Garden. You can go 12 blocks in either direction.
It's amazing that there's nothing, that there's no viable place.
Vornado, Mike Fascitelli, they came and they go, how would you like to do something just for fun? And I'm still waiting for the phone call to follow up on the fun call because there's no services. Look, I'm from New York. I used to say to myself, why would you do a restaurant unless it benefited the community? I mean, there's so many steakhouses. Why do we need another one? So the restaurants that I've put in, I haven't put them in willy-nilly saying, gee, I can do steak better than, I can do Southwestern. No. I look at what's missing. So I open a Vietnamese restaurant. Guess what? Nobody cares. I open a Mexican restaurant.
That was one of your...
No. It's an amazing thing. I go around the country and I try to see things in other cities that are popular. So in San Francisco, the most popular restaurant, it's like a Nobu, is the Slanted Door Vietnamese. But guess what? The people in New York, they like what they like. But this is the cultural epicenter of the world. And that's why we're fortunate, because the people, when they come to New York, they know they're going to eat well, and they support us, and we need them to support us.
But New York is the capital of the world, and it's also the food capital of the world. And, even with the hotels, I mean, finally, we don't have a 5- or 6-star, they're planning the Shangri-La. And that hopefully is going to change. But I don't have to tell you about one thing about the New York market. One of the biggest problems of any hotel having a restaurant was the union. I mean, you couldn't afford.
We could do a whole show on that.
Please, I've done a whole show on that. That's been a separate topic, having the hotel workers over here. But so what do you see in 2008, because we don't have much time, what do you see happening in the restaurant business as in your perspective?
Well, I mean, I think the market is probably getting to a point where a lot of landlords will look a little bit harder at structuring interesting deals. Again, the smart landlords, the landlords who buy property over the past few years can't afford to do deals with you. The landlords who have a lower basis and realize...
But the foreclosed property, the ones that will take over, you'll be able to do a deal. Lawrence.
If the landlords have enough incentive based on the other economics in their building to want to consider us an amenity, because if they don't consider us an amenity, it's almost like on a case-by-case basis. The guy has to have that head. I want these people to make my building better.
Nobu now defines 57, the building.
That's right. Al, what do you see?
I think it's it's all a benefit to the landlords to have a good restaurant inside your location. It betters the building itself, and it's more attractive to the people that come to move there.
True.
I think you're going to see developers become very creative.
You're going to see any developers become their own restaurateurs?
No, creative in the sense that they will finally understand the value that we bring to their properties.
So I think definitely they see a value, and I think New York City restaurant. So after 7 years, I've never had a restaurant show. I'm happy that I brought the who's who of the restaurant business.
But you're still going to have trouble getting a reservation at their restaurants. Mine, you're in. Don't worry.
I'm in. I'll have to say, who? Stoller? Okay.
If you want a reservation at one of my restaurants, just call Drew.
Okay, no problem.
That's true. I make more at his restaurant than my own.
I'd like to thank Jeff Roseman, Lawrence Kretschmer, Alistair Paglia, and last but not least, Drew Neaporent for being here. We'll see you next week. Thanks, you. Michael.
Major funding for these programs is provided by grants from First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Murray Hill Properties, Bank of America, SJP Properties, Allied Partners, Greenberg Traurig LP. Additional funding is provided by grants from Arbor Realty Trust, Antares Investment Partners, Athena Group, BRT Realty Trust, Burden LLP, CB Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, Gemini Real Estate Advisors LLC, Herrick Feinstein, Helmsley Spear, Jackson Development Group, John Katzimatidis, Herbert J. Sims Company, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Kilroy Metal Products, Madison Realty Capital, Marcus and Millichap, Meridian Capital Group, M&T Bank, Must Development LLC, Newmark Knight Frank, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal, Sidney Fettner Associates, Sheldrake Organization, Signature Bank, Studley, the Moynihan Organization, Triangle Services, the Witkoff Organization, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.